All right, you guys. So here's the twist that we're going to talk about today. And then your assignment today will be all about practicing this concept, okay? This is one of the biggest things that comes back to kind of haunt you in Algebra 2 trig. So make sure you're asking questions. There's tons of videos online about it if you don't necessarily like my method too. And don't forget, you can always stop in for office hours for help, okay? All right. So we just talked about looking for GCFs to make factoring a quadratic easier. But what happens if the number in front of the x squared cannot be divided out of the entire expression? So if you start out with a quadratic of ax squared plus bx plus c, and a is not a 1, and there is not a GCF, then you must follow the steps below. So here's what I mean by that. Here's an example off to the side. Notice how there's a 6 in the front? But the problem is I can't take a 6 out of all three of those terms because that middle term will then turn into 1/6 x, which sounds horrible. So if you can't take the number that's in the front out of all three terms, here's what you do. Step 1, find A, C, and B and put it in a table. So here's what I mean by that. 6 is your A, 1 is your B, and -12 is your C, just like it was for a quadratic formula. So what you're going to do is you're going to make just a little mini table, and you're going to write ACB. You'll hear me refer to it as the ACB table, okay? What that means is when you put two letters next to each other in math, doesn't that mean to multiply them? So that means I'm going to do 6 times -12. And 6 times -12 gives me -72. I just did that in my calculator. And then the B value is 1, so I'm just going to put a 1 right there, okay? Next step is going to sound much more familiar. Step 2, determine two numbers that multiply to give you AC and add to give you B. Now notice how the order kind of flip-flopped. Usually we add to give the first term and multiply to get the second term, right? So the way I remember it is you had to multiply two numbers to get your AC, so that's the number you want it to multiply to be, okay? So if you have 72, you could do 1 and 72. That's obviously not going to add to give me 1. I think... Perfect. Let's use 8 and 9. Because if I keep the 9 positive and make the 8 negative, those two numbers multiply to give me 72, but add to give me 1. So yay, I'm good so far. Step 3, okay? Put the two numbers you found in step 2 in place of the middle term of the function. So here's what I mean by that. Usually what I'll do is I'll copy the 6x squared, that's in the front, and then I'll copy the -12. And then in place of this plus 1x, I'm going to put the -8x plus 9x that we just got right here. Okay, so the reason for that, you guys, there is a reason behind it, obviously, but the main idea is if you were to combine these two, isn't -8x plus 9x the same thing as positive 1x? So it's one of those weird math things where technically we didn't change the equation, we just kind of manipulated it in a way that's going to help us out here in just a second. All right, step 4. This is sometimes the hardest part for students, okay? You're going to factor out the GCF, or the greatest common factor, from the left half and the right half of the new equation. So here's what I do with that. I draw a squiggle line. So you'll hear me call it the squiggle line, where I basically cut it in half. And I say, okay, if I was just looking at this left half of the equation, okay, just 6x squared minus 8x, what would that be? Like, what would the GCF be? Meaning, what is the largest thing I can take out of both of those terms? Well, the largest number I can take out of both those terms is 2. And by take out, I mean divide. But notice how this one has an x squared and this one has an x. So I could also take out an x. Then I say, all right, well, what's left over? 6x squared divided by 2x leaves me with 3x. -8x divided by 2x leaves me with -4. Okay, next step is you're going to take whatever this parenthesis was, leave a space, and then you're going to recopy it over here. That will give you a hint as to what the GCF is for the right side. So if I'm looking at the right side, the biggest number I can take out of that, let's see, is a 3. And actually that works out great because 3 times 3x gets me back to that 9x, and 3 times -4 gets me back to the -12. Now what you do is you take both these guys to make your two parentheses. The one that was repeated is one of your factors. And then these two guys here in the front kind of join together as the other factor. And then that is your final answer for how to factor 6x squared plus x minus 12. Okay, so that's quite a process, but it works every single time. A lot of students, I've had a lot of success with this, where they really like this method because it does work every single time. Having said that, some of you are much better at number sense than others. And so if that's the case, I actually recommend another method that you can use just as well. In fact, I was never taught the method that you see on this screen. I was taught, when I learned this in high school, guess and check. Like, figure it out. Plug in numbers, see what happens. So let me show you what I mean by that. So guess and check is basically you have to be really good at double distributing. Okay, if you can kind of start to double distribute in your head and visualize where the numbers come from, guess and check works out pretty well. So for example, this 6x squared in the front could only happen two ways. Either your two parentheses start with 2x and 3x, or your two parentheses start with x and 6x. That's the only way you're going to get that 6x squared in the front. Okay, now the only way you're going to get 12 at the end of it is either using 1 and 12, okay, or 12 and 1. You'll see why I'm writing it twice, okay, 2 and 6, and then or 3 and 4. So I'm going to rewrite those numbers over here. Those are all your combos, basically. Then what you're going to start doing is just trying out numbers, okay? So for example, if I put, I'm going to use the eraser a lot, so if I put the 1 here and the 12 here, okay? 1 times 3x this is going to be 3x plus 24x. That's not going to help me get 1x in the middle, so I'm not going to work with that. That's definitely not going to happen. But we need to try it the other way as well. So what if I put 12 and 1 here? This would give me 36x plus 2x. There's no way that's going to give me 1x in the middle. So again, that's not going to work for me. Okay, so I can erase those two options. They don't work. Okay, and you just kind of go through all of the options. Now we got the answer of 2x plus 3 and 3x minus 4. So here's what that would look like. I would use, so it's this combo, right? Eventually I would get to that, just kind of try it out. Well, 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 4 is 8. When I think of 9 and 8, I think I can actually get a positive 1 in the middle if I make the 9 positive and the 8 negative. That's the exact same answer we got on this slide right here, okay? Here's the downside, okay? Guess and check in this particular situation is not the fastest route because you have, well, it's 2x and 3x or x and 6x. Plus, with it being a 12 at the end, look at all the different possibilities you can use to try to guess and check, okay? An example of one that might be easy to guess and check, though, would be something like, I'm trying to make one up, so give me just a second. I need to write it off to the side. Hold tight. Would be something like this guy. This would be a great example of guess and check because your only option is one of your parentheses is 2x, the other one is x. There's not multiple options like there was up here at the top. The other nice part is with that 5 at the end, either it's 1 and 5 or 5 and 1. Those are your choices, right? So in this case, if I put the 5 right here, the 2x and the 5 will give me 10, and this will give me 1. And when I think of 10 and 1, I think, okay, I could get that negative 9 in the middle. If I make the 10 negative and the 1 positive. Okay, so guess and check actually is faster if this guy is easier to kind of figure out what the combinations are, okay? So here's the deal. You've learned a lot of different ways to factor. So here's your process for how to do this. Step 1, always look for a GCF, okay? So if there is a 2 in the front, don't automatically do this if all 3 terms can divide nicely by 2, okay? Then if a is equal to 1, find 2 numbers and factor. So if a is 1 and it's like, I don't know, something like this, okay? Find the 2 numbers, factor it, boom, you're good, okay? But if a is not equal to 1, and there was not a GCF, then use the process we talked about today, either the ACB table or guess and check to be able to factor and then possibly also solve, okay? So today you do have a homework number 6 assignment. It is going to be posted with this video, so make sure you get that done today. And then remember, as you have questions, this is kind of a tricky topic, but it's one that comes back in Algebra 2, probably more so than anything I've taught you so far, okay? So make sure you're asking questions. All right, good luck, you guys.